Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. In this episode, I feature Marcus Brutus, who I had met a few summers ago during an exhibition at Harper's Books in Easthampton, and I've followed him since. Marcus began exhibiting his work and has quickly attracted the attention of collectors and institutions with 2 solo exhibitions and a monograph entitled The Uhmericans, and a solo presentation at EXPO Chicago 2019. By making richly layered paintings that depict scenes of contemporary African American life and beyond, Marcus is primarily engaged in the act of putting the Black figure front and center on the canvas, and you feel those figures when you're up close. His influences extend far beyond the history of painting, with references ranging from music, photography, literature, sports, and socio-political history. He has a skill for compressing together a wider range of subjects into coherent narratives that illuminate quotidian moments in Black life, both imagined and real. At my first encounter with his work, I thought to myself I could easily live with his paintings, which are indeed a reflection of his personality, both easy and mellow. So with that, I welcome Marcus Brutus to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. You started off in fashion, you transitioned to art. So share with us that journey.
So essentially, I started off, I hold a degree in public relations, and I wanted to work in fashion. But what drew me to fashion was sort of the visual aspect and element of it. But then what I kind of quickly learned, actually working in public relations, you do play a role in that realm, but not so much. You know, it's not so much of a creative sort of or expressive kind of industry. So then I think I kind of grew a bit. I grew a bit of sort of displeasure with that career path. I didn't really see a long, any sort of long-term vision in that sphere. So kind of as I was a bit disgruntled with that line of work, that's what sparked me to kind of then say, all right, well, let me take a shot at actually creating my own visual images. And that initially was I initially was creating computer generated graphics that many people haven't seen. But then something about that still kind of didn't give me that full satisfaction. And then that's when I kind of grew a very strong attachment to not just creating images, but also the process behind creating image and sort of the physical process. And that's why I took up painting. And it was a slow process. I kind of pushed myself to, initially it was kind of creating a drawing a day. I kind of had that be my initial task, just to kind of create a sense of consistency and to see how much if this was something that I was actually interested in. And then from doing that, and I kind of began to track a bit of progress, I ended up then venturing into watercolors, and then I took up painting on canvas.
Did you always lean towards figurative work? Did you ever consider abstract?
I think I made a conscious decision early on that because I was self-taught, I thought there was a bit of how to say, insecurities in terms of starting off with the abstract, because then it, because I wasn't in the art world at all, and I just felt like I had to approach it almost like a technical skill, as well as a, sort of a very expressive practice. So that's what kind of drew me to wanting to do figurative work, but also like I love figurative work as well. So it kind of worked out.
In terms of what to paint, what type of figures to paint, was that influenced by your surroundings?
No. So as far as it goes with subject matter, I just have a natural vested interest in sort of history and Black history in particular. So, I would watch documentaries. I would save, I'd find images, clippings, everything. That's just naturally what I would do. And then that became my source material. I just all had it sitting out in, in folders on my laptop, or just actual physical, in books and magazines and so on. So that just became, all right, I'm going to create drawings from, create works from these images and have that sort of inspire the work and be what the work is about. And then through the, first it became, it began with sort of copying the images, but then it became, well, I want to actually tell stories, and especially sort of underrepresented narratives and so on and so forth. And then through doing that, then taking it further, was finding, different ways to sort of present everyday Black life, and then infuse in sort of historical narratives, as well as sort of cultural elements and things like that. So that's kind of how it all developed into what it is now.
Did you ever consider photography?
No, and I think it was more so because of the fact that with painting, there's such an independent element and aspect to it, so right. I didn't need anyone else or any other thing to kind of get the work done.
Yeah, and photography also takes you back to the laptop.
Yeah,
the
exactly,
computer.
Exactly.
Right. If you think back to your childhood, were you inclined, or did you lean towards art, being an artist back then?
Not an artist per se, because what my perception of an artist was at the time, it was like, the classics or impressionist artists, so that was like that's as far as my mind could conceive as far as what an artist was. But I've always been a sort of a visual person. My memories, and I retain so much visual information, Growing up, I was a huge sports fan, and I could just remember, watching like Jordan of the Chicago Bulls, and I could tell you what sneakers he had on or things like that, or sort of different haircuts, or I just used to kind of piece things together like that, or certain small, just very small things visually used to mean so much to me or have so much significance. So it kind of all developed. I kind of later on now I've been able to kind of form a connection to that. But at the time I didn't know that it meant that I was kind of processing things like an artist, but that kind of was my early experience in that. And also what I used to make small doodles for the things like I thought were cool when I was younger, and that was something I used to do.
It's great that you early in your career you came to conclusion that fashion was not the right thing for you, that you could be, because now you're applying your creativity and you're sharing it with everybody. And I love your work. It's beautiful. So you mentioned narrative. So let's talk about your narrative.
Yeah. So kind of the goal for most of my works is to have, as far as the subject goes, to have the Black figure central to it, or just something, in regards to history or just everyday, life. But then also, I want to also not capture kind of just like moments. I kind of want to capture sort of everyday images that kind of reflect more so or give sort of the feeling of just an everyday and kind of regular sort of human, and not sort of the supernatural like or you know, iconic sort of imagery as well. I mean, there are times where I have painted particular people, but most of my paintings are actually comprised of fictional figures that represent an idea or you know or something, or they're presented, it's portraiture where they're presented in a particular environment and so on and so forth, and there'll be sort of small little clues as you know small little references embedded within the work. But yeah, that's you know, that for subject matter I kind of try to focus on representing everyday life and so on and so forth.
In researching you before we talked today, I remember seeing that music has an impact on your work. So will you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So the impact that music has on the work is it's more so the culture around music and kind of the role that music plays within society, within history. So it's, you know, many of my works take the titles from just song titles that I'll see, and you know, it may not even be the subject within that song, but some way the way the words are constructed and grouped together, they kind of fit perfectly with the painting, and they kind of like, if I'm struggling for a title, I can open up my iTunes and see a song title, I'm just like, that's exactly what it's about.
Isn't it amazing how the brain works?
Yeah.
It just connects things for you.
Yeah, it just kind of connects things.
So what genre music is it usually?
It's everything. It could be jazz, it could be soul, hip hop, you know, R&B. It literally any sort of thing that I, at the time that I'm listening to, or that I kind of feel that's what the, you know, maybe the palette kind of draws me into, like, you know, new wave. And then I'm looking at something and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly kind of what the energy that kind of the image begins to emote and so. And I think it's one of the things where there's so much more to it than just sort of the actual song itself. You know, there's a life beyond just the song or the artist and so on and so forth.
And some songs take you back,
right? Yeah,
to certain experiences in life,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
So in the paintings, is there a historical or personal connections to the figures that you paint?
There's both.
Both, interesting.
You know, at times I've painted actual family members, friends. I've made several self-portraits. But then there's also a sort of a historical aspect of it. For instance, on the cover of the Uhmericans book, there is a figure. There are two male figures.
With the flag.
Yeah, with the flag. That's actually inspired by an actual sports moment.
It's good to know it's not a political moment.
Well, I mean, it was a political moment that invaded the sports world.
Okay.
Because it's all intertwined.
Okay.
But it's what I thought about during the whole Kaepernick situation.
I see.
And then
yes.
I drew that in the 90s. His name, I'm not going to attempt to say his name at the moment, but there was a player that used to have a prayer protest, and then when that became sort of uncovered by the media, a fan had brought this huge American flag and kind of erected it during the Star Spangled Banner whilst he was praying, and it kind of created this sort of famous image. And then I wanted to just kind of draw a connection to the two by having these two guys wear their jerseys whilst they're sitting down, and then there's the flag being erected behind them. So yeah, so it's a bit of both, and then there's also a connection to art history, because flag paintings, a la Jasper Johns, that was also something that slightly entered my mind while I was creating the painting.
So as a self-taught artist, what are some of the challenges that you encountered?
So recently I've been thinking about this, and I don't necessarily see the process or the journey that I've been on as being self-taught, but more so I've created my own curriculum as far as how I look to approach becoming an artist. Because I have to I have to study on art history. I have to learn and practice technique. I have to have an understanding of what's going on, the current climate and so forth, or how I fit in, or what's the significance of the work that I create. So these are all things that I presume other artists are thinking about that, or, that's what you'll learn at, in art school and so forth. So I like to think that I kind of set down my own sort of curriculum, just because I just struggle sometimes with instructors where I feel like it's not going in the direction I want to, or it's not going at the pace that I'd like to approach it. But it really began with it's just every day. Like every day I'm observing, I'm looking. Every day I'm finding new sort of references, new sources of inspiration. Every day I want to create something. I have the urge to create something. And every day I want to read and learn about, whether it's art from the past or what's currently going on. I have even interest in the art market and so on. So everything about it, so that's kind of, it's about the consistently kind of embedding myself in the entire practice.
I'm always envious of artists, because you can develop a career. I mean, you get to really express what you feel, versus coding or walking on Wall Street or something like that. You actually get to get up and think about life and create something from that. And I think it's great. So, were there any particularly artists in your studies, in your research? Were there any particular artists or genre of artists that you studied?
It started off with, I really was moved by figurative works initially, and more importantly, sort of the contemporary figurative painters, or modern or contemporary figurative painters. I really, artists like Luke Twymans, Henry Taylor, Carrie James Marshall, and so on and so forth. They've all kind of helped me throughout the process. Alice Neal, because it kind of sometimes, let's say at the moment there's like a major exhibition on an abstract expressionist work or so on and so forth, and you're kind of feeling like, oh man, is the work that I'm creating even making sense right now? But then they kind of reinforce it, like, yes, this is, there's a place for all of this, and so it kind of gives me a reason to go on and create and explore some more and see what I can do and kind of where I fit into everything.
So are there any communities in particular that give you ideas?
I think I'm interested in kind of, I've always been interested in kind of counterculture, but also I'm also interested in uncovering. So it goes back to sort of subject matter. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in, when I'm learning about history, or I'm looking through history and I'm looking at these different, just all of the places that, there have been sort of like the Black metropolis, or where, whenever I uncover it, I feel inspired to create work about it. For instance, in my solo exhibition last summer with Harper's Books, I made a painting about Inkwell Beach, which featured in sort of the Black Martha's Vineyard, Oak Bluff neighborhood. Oh, yes. So it's things like that where I'm like, wow, I didn't know about that. Or, so I'll just see that, and I'm just like, I want to feature that in a work. And I think it's a way to, when I learn about anything, what I would like to do is share it with people, because I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know about this. So hopefully if someone doesn't know about it, they'll, I can share it, and through the work. And because I'm, the paintings are predominantly figures, whenever there are words, I feel like people kind of get drawn to it and like, why is that there? Or what's the significance of that? And then they kind of then go on and, research it or kind of it'll kind of make sense in the context of the work, and it'll be a bit more straightforward, and they'll understand, like, oh, this is what it's about. There are instances when people sort of recognize the reference. For instance, I made a painting of Ousmane Sembène, the father of West African film, and someone just was so drawn to just that element of the work. They kind of even looked past, like, what the painting was really about, and that kind of was a bit more of... had a greater significance to it, and they kind of were like asking, like, oh, what's my relationship to Senegal, and so on and so forth. And I was like, well, the work isn't really necessarily about this in particular. It kind of is just sort of featuring, kind of slightly featuring an iconic figure, but it was also featuring a lot of other sort of things within the mix. So it's always interesting what are the things that people kind of pick up on, and it's kind of based on their own personal experiences and so on.
So it's good that you can provide enough pieces of work so they can find one that they actually like.
No, yeah.
So I love your colors; they're strong. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's all about kind of what I'm feeling at the moment, in terms of, like, if I'm working on a group of works, I'm like, this is kind of what I'm feeling at the moment. For instance, but then I recently found kind of this bright yellow-green that kind of, to me, it's such a contemporary color, and just in terms of contemporary life, because if you kind of see a construction site, you'll see, like, these bright yellow-green cones, or you'll see a crossing guard with this sort of neon kind of vest on. It's just something that kind of it exists in just our daily lives, and I kind of want to have that feature in most of my works, because it just kind of pops, and it kind of gives it this, to me, it kind of is a color of today. And it's uplifting. Yeah. It's like listening to good music. Sometimes colors can have the same type of impact. Yeah, exactly. And when you when that's kind of like the color that pops in the midst of a kind of a bit more of a mundane palette, it kind of just draws you into, like, oh, well, what's that? Or like if you've got shoes that color, you're like, oh, I'm drawn to that or something.
Yeah. I want you to explain to us. I don't always understand what artists mean when they say certain things, because my brain is so black and white. You were quoted as saying that you address the division between personal expression and public presentation. So what does that mean?
So initially, when I was rereading that quote, at first I was a bit stumped on what I meant at the time. But
what you felt at the time.
But I think it's kind of like how, how things exist in your mind, and then kind of how that then manifests into the creation of a particular work that you share with the public. So it's kind of just that sort of the relationship between that, because, for instance, there are paintings that I've created that have been influenced by just pure rage, but then how that manifests and what I choose to paint, I don't have any real paintings that kind of would elicit that sort of emotion, but it could have been something that was inspired by a moment that would cause me rage, and then I kind of took a deep breath and kind of found a way to kind of then communicate a feeling that,
So in painting, then, for you, is it a form of therapy?
Definitely. It's a way for me to kind of release what I have within myself, but in a way that, that's a bit well thought out. It's not just kind of straightforward raw emotions. It's kind of the steps in which it, and then kind of like the final step as far as expressing how I felt about a particular thing, or how I currently feel.
I don't sense any rage or anger in your work at all. Mm-hmm. I view your work as uplifting, and it's a combination of how you depict the characters, but also the color palette, the colors that you use. Yeah, your work it's easy to live with. It's pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
I actually like it a lot. So I bought the book that Harper's Books had published, and I know it was a collaboration with Harper and Antoine Sargent.
Yeah, so Antoine had written the foreword in the book, but it's a project that definitely Harper kind of took the lead on, and it kind of chronicled some of the early works before I met Harper, but then also kind of the works that that I've shared or sold throughout the time from when we first met to about around October of last year. So yeah, it's kind of just the early days, the early work that I've kind of had, and it's all surrounded. It takes the name from the first exhibition that I had titled The Uhmericans.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of centered around that.
So what are you working on now?
Currently, I'm working on a group of paintings that are kind of they're going to feature different materials. I mean, there's still works on canvas or linen, and they're all figurative works, but there's a bit more of an experimental aspect to them. Like there's spray paint,
oh really?
So on and so forth.
Oh, that's great.
And the palette's a bit different. And some of the works feature iconography, like religious iconography, and it's just kind of. I remember back in October when we I had a solo show with Harper in Chicago.
I remember seeing that show.
It was fulfilling. It was great. But then I kind of felt like I figured out how to make the right group of work, and I kind of wanted to now kind of be a bit more expressive, to kind of challenge myself to make sure that I'm not sort of just focused on creating a final image and kind of neglecting the process in which it takes to create a final image. So I like to start off with kind of the figures that will feature in the work, and I have an idea of that. But then in the background, or even sometimes in the foreground of these paintings, there'll be kind of just like experiments, or just kind of happy accidents. There's drips, and there are drips featured in the painting, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of creating a health, trying to marriage a slight, interest in abstraction, but then also maintaining, figures in the paintings.
Have you ever thought of, excuse me, using dark colors?
Yeah. So there are a few darker paintings, and I think now I think what's so satisfying about the new paintings that I'm currently working on is that they're not all easy to live with.
Oh, really?
Visually,
okay.
I feel. So maybe so who knows? Who kind of, we don't really know like what the reaction will be, but I feel like once I kind of sit down and they're out, like, and we could see like the full breadth, it'll make a lot more sense.
I look forward to seeing them. How did you go about the process of marketing yourself? Are you active on Instagram?
Yeah, that's actually the entire purpose of my Instagram, and kind of what kicked off my career. So essentially I was creating a bunch of work, but no one would see it.
Right. Free marketing. Yeah. It really is free marketing.
And then I decided that I was going to dedicate my social media presence or just I'm only on Instagram, to just showing my paintings. Mm-hmm. And then because I felt like, because no one was seeing the work, they were almost never finished. So the act of posting it on Instagram to social media was kind of a way for me to say I had completed a work.
Interesting.
And then throughout that process, that's, I kind of slowly gained more eyes on the work. And then through that, after a while. The artist Jen Guidi had actually contacted me, and she had bought a couple paintings, and it's through her buying the paintings, and then she had shared them on Instagram, that Harper had seen the work, and he had reached out, and then it was the upstairs art fair. I'd sent 4 paintings to that, and that went well. And then we were like a month later, he was like, "Hey, would you like to just have a complete solo exhibition?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?"
He has a good eye.
Yeah,
he really does have a good eye.
And then from there, we've kind of been working together, and he's represented the work.
Have you ever considered sculptures?
I haven't. I've thought about sculptures, but I haven't really thought deep enough on how that would look or what that would be. I think, it's something that I want to develop. Just, as I'm experimenting more, I think that's where it'll, how that would look will kind of manifest. But at the moment, I wouldn't see myself kind of, I don't see the relationship to the paintings yet, but I think that I'm kind of on the path to kind of, to where it will completely make sense on how that would sort of come to be.
It's interesting. That's good that you're thinking about it. And of course, I'm tracking you, and I'll be continuing to follow you on Instagram. So I'll see that. So it's been great to spend time with you. I'm going to continue to stay in touch with Harper to make sure I don't miss any of your openings. And thanks for taking the time out and explaining to us your narrative and what drives your creativity.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.